3 times the calcium of spinach, complete protein like steak, more vitamin C than oranges, and it's classified as a noxious weed. Right now, someone's spraying poison on it to protect crops with half its nutrition. This is lamb's quarter, quinoa's wild mother, and there's a reason you've never heard of it. Free food doesn't generate profit, and what I'm about to show you will change how you see every crack in the pavement. Let's start with something concrete. Archaeologists working through Neolithic settlements in Denmark and Sweden kept finding the same thing, site after site. Tiny black seeds, thousands of them, stored in clay pots, scattered in ancient fire pits, ground up on stone tools. This wasn't occasional snacking. This was a staple crop that kept people alive for 10,000 years. But the story that really gets me happened in a Danish peat bog in 1950. Workers cutting peat found a man who'd been preserved perfectly for over 2,000 years. You could still see his face. His hair was still there. Scientists examined his stomach expecting something special, maybe a ritual feast. What they found was basically just porridge. Lamb's quarter seeds and leaves mixed with other wild seeds. His last meal. His name is Tolland Man. He died around 400 BCE, eating something that's now listed on pest control websites as a target for chemical elimination. In 2,400 years, we went from this is someone's final meal to spray this immediately. Fast forward to medieval England, around 1200. Walk through any village and you'd see this plant growing in gardens. Farmers noticed that when they fed lamb's quarter to their chickens, the birds got plump fast, not just heavier. Richer meat, bigger eggs with deep yellow yolks. The nutritional impact was so obvious it changed how people raised poultry. So they grew it deliberately, for their chickens and for themselves. It's spring in 1450. Stored grain is running low, salted meat has been the diet for months, and the body is desperate for something fresh. Outside, lamb's quarter appears, bright green and dusted white. People harvest it by the armful, boil it with fat and salt, and eat it as the first green thing after winter. Here's what's wild. This same pattern shows up all over the world in ways that suggest people figured this out independently. In Greece, they called it horta and ate it with olive oil and lemon. Some villages still do. In Germany, it's Gänsefuß, which literally means goosefoot because of the leaf shape. France has chenopode, different continents, completely different food traditions, and they all gave this plant a specific name. There's no special word for that boring plant by the road nobody cares about. The fact that cultures across Europe, Asia, Africa, and eventually the Americas all named this plant specifically tells you it played a real role in survival. After a winter of stored foods that have lost most of their vitamins, when you're depleted and feeling it, lamb's quarter showed up right when people needed it and delivered exactly what their bodies were craving. People back then didn't understand vitamins or amino acids, but they didn't need to. They just knew, eat this plant in spring, feel noticeably stronger within days. Do that for 3,000 years, and you've got some pretty solid observational knowledge. So the real question isn't why people ate it. The question is, why on earth did we stop? First, the 1600s and 1700s brought new crops from the Americas and Asia. Potatoes from South America, tomatoes, peppers, vegetables from China and India. The Columbian Exchange brought genuine variety to European tables. Same plant, same nutrition. It just became less interesting because humans naturally get excited about novelty. Lamb's quarter was familiar to the point of boring. Then the 1800s brought industrial agriculture, and this is where things get complicated. Lamb's quarter has this characteristic that's either amazing or problematic depending on who you ask. It's really, really good at growing. Farmers don't even plant it. It just shows up wherever soil gets disturbed, and it spreads through self-seeding so aggressively that one plant can drop 50,000 seeds. Plant them once and you've got lamb's quarter appearing for years. If you're a small farmer working a family plot, that's perfect. Free food that plants itself. Doesn't need watering. Doesn't need fertilizer. Grows fine in poor soil. Handles drought. But if you're trying to build industrial agriculture in the 1800s and 1900s, that same trait becomes a nightmare because the whole system is being organized around completely different priorities. You can't patent a plant that reproduces freely, sell seeds every year if it spreads on its own, or mechanize something that grows unevenly and matures at different times. It doesn't ship well, doesn't store long, and can't be easily processed. By 1945, when World War II ended, you've got these massive chemical factories that had been making explosives and other wartime materials, and they need something to do in peacetime. All this infrastructure for synthesizing nitrogen compounds, chlorine compounds, chemical agents. The war's over, but the factories are still there. So they pivot to agricultural chemicals. One of the first major products is 2,4-D, one of the early herbicides that came directly out of wartime research programs. And guess what became prime targets for these new herbicides? Plants in the Chenopodium family, including lamb's quarter. Not because they're harmful to humans, but because they show up where they're not wanted in this new system. They compete with crops, disrupt mechanized harvesting, and break the system's order. As agricultural institutions took over the narrative, lamb's quarter was gradually reframed from a useful food into an agricultural problem, not because the plant changed, but because the language around it did. By the 1970s, this 10,000-year-old food crop has been totally reclassified as something to eliminate. And here's where it gets almost funny in an ironic way. While all this is happening, quinoa starts getting imported from Peru and Bolivia at premium prices. Same plant family, similar nutritional profile, but quinoa's been bred for bigger seeds and more uniform growth. It fits the industrial model. It gets shelf space at Whole Foods, while its wild parent is getting sprayed with Roundup in the parking lot outside. The economics are absurd. Quinoa costs $5 to $8 a pound, sometimes more for organic. It has to be shipped from South America, stored, processed, packaged, distributed. Meanwhile, its wild ancestor, which arguably has a better nutritional profile when you include the leaves, is growing in backyards across all 50 states without anyone doing anything. We're not just ignoring a free resource. We're actively spending money to eliminate it while paying premium prices to import something similar from another continent. Now let's get into what actually makes this plant special nutritionally, because this is where it gets really interesting. 100 grams of raw lamb's quarter leaves, roughly a cup of loosely packed fresh greens, contains 309 milligrams of calcium. 100 grams of raw spinach, which everyone thinks of as this calcium powerhouse, has 99 milligrams. That's not like, oh, it's a bit more. That's 3 times more calcium. In practical terms, if you cook up a cup of lamb's quarter, you're getting around 464 milligrams of calcium. A cup of whole milk has about 300 milligrams. A cup of cooked kale, which is also promoted for calcium, has about 177 milligrams. So this weed growing in parking lot cracks is giving you more calcium per serving than dairy, without any lactose issues, without industrial dairy farming, without needing refrigerated supply chains. It's just a plant growing in dirt, but calcium is just the start. The protein content is 4.2 grams per 100 grams of fresh leaves. Lettuce has 1.4 grams. Spinach has 2.9 grams. We're looking at 3 times the protein of lettuce, about 50% more than spinach. But here's where it gets really interesting. The type of protein matters more than the amount. Most plant proteins are what's called incomplete, meaning they're missing 1 or more of the 9 essential amino acids that your body can't make and has to get from food. This is why vegans hear a lot about food combining. Rice and beans together give you complete protein because rice is low in lysine and beans are low in methionine, so together they balance out. But eat them separately and you're getting incomplete protein. Lamb's quarter just doesn't have that problem. It's got complete protein right there in the plant, all 9 essential amino acids: leucine, isoleucine, valine, lysine, methionine, phenylalanine, threonine, tryptophan, and histidine, in ratios that your body can use directly. Nutritionally, lamb's quarter provides the same complete protein your body gets from meat or quinoa. But while steak depends on industrial systems to produce, this plant delivers nearly the same outcome with virtually no input at all. And then there's vitamin C. Lamb's quarter has 80 milligrams per 100 grams. Oranges, which are literally the poster child for vitamin C, have 53 milligrams. So this random weed has 50% more vitamin C than the fruit that's specifically marketed for vitamin C content. Before we had global shipping and year-round produce, before refrigeration, that difference was actually life or death important. Scurvy from vitamin C deficiency was a real problem in northern climates during late winter and early spring, when stored food had degraded and there weren't fresh sources available. Having one plant show up right at the end of winter, delivering enough vitamin C to prevent your connective tissue from breaking down. That's not random coincidence. That's ecology and human survival lining up. The potassium content is 452 milligrams per 100 grams. Potassium helps regulate fluid balance, muscle contractions, nerve signals. Everyone knows bananas have potassium, right? A medium banana has about 422 milligrams. Lamb's quarter has more potassium than bananas, which surprises people because bananas are basically the potassium food in popular culture. Now we get to the really interesting stuff. The compounds that don't show up on standard nutrition labels but actually do things in your body. Saponins are this class of compounds that get their name from the Latin word for soap, because when you mix them with water, they create a soapy lather. But in your digestive system, they do something pretty useful. Saponins have this structure, where one end of the molecule is attracted to water and the other end is attracted to fats. When you eat food with cholesterol in it, or when your liver makes cholesterol, saponins run into those cholesterol molecules in your gut. The fat-loving end grabs onto the cholesterol, basically wrapping around it, and creating this complex that's harder for your intestinal wall to absorb. So instead of that cholesterol passing into your bloodstream where it could potentially build up in your arteries, it just moves through your digestive tract attached to saponins and gets eliminated. Think of it mechanically. Cholesterol is trying to cross through your intestinal wall into your blood, and saponins are basically intercepting it and escorting it out before that can happen. Your body never even gets a chance to absorb it. And this isn't just theory. A 2003 study in the Journal of Agricultural and Food Chemistry tested lamb's quarter extracts for different biological activities and found significant antioxidant effects from the flavonoid compounds and saponins. Free radicals are these unstable molecules that cause oxidative stress and damage to cells, and antioxidants neutralize them. People pay $20 to $40 for bottles of antioxidant supplements made from acai berries, or whatever exotic fruit is trendy. This plant growing for free shows the same antioxidant activity in lab tests. This is where the economics get striking. The global statin market alone is worth around $20 billion a year, with millions of people taking these drugs daily for life. Effective, but not without side effects. Meanwhile, a plant growing almost everywhere contains compounds that naturally reduce cholesterol absorption, backed by centuries of traditional use, yet remains largely unknown, while a $50 billion supplement industry sells isolated versions of what it already provides as whole food. At the same time, the packaged salad industry earns billions selling short-lived greens produced through industrial systems, even though lamb's quarter offers equal or better nutrition at essentially no cost. The herbicide industry globally is worth $33 billion. Companies like Bayer, Syngenta, Corteva, their whole business depends on people believing they need chemical products to control unwanted plants. Walk into any Home Depot, and there are entire aisles of herbicides, with products specifically marketed for broadleaf weed control that often have pictures of lamb's quarter right on the label showing what it kills. So how does a plant that kept civilizations alive for 10,000 years become something almost nobody recognizes? Not through some grand conspiracy requiring secret meetings, but through basic economic incentives that just lined up in ways that made the plant invisible. The first step was shifting from crop to weed wasn't just semantics. It completely reframed how the plant was perceived, turning something valuable into something disposable. Once that framing took hold, institutions reinforced it, and agricultural authorities, universities, and government agencies all treated lamb's quarter as a problem to be managed and eliminated rather than a food to be understood. Search for lamb's quarter on any agricultural extension website, and you'll find pages of detail on how to identify it, control it, and kill it, but almost no mention that it's edible or that humans relied on it for thousands of years. The omission isn't malicious, it's structural, reflecting institutions designed to serve commercial agriculture, where the plant is seen only as competition. Over time, lamb's quarter is removed from commerce entirely. You can't buy it in grocery stores, rarely see it at farmers markets, and won't find it in major seed catalogs, because there's no market for something that grows for free. With no profit incentive, it disappears from shelves, and once it's no longer sold, people stop seeing it as food at all. Meanwhile, Quinoa, its domesticated cousin, fills supermarket aisles, wrapped in marketing about ancient wisdom and complete protein, shipped thousands of miles at premium prices. We're not just ignoring a free resource, we're paying to destroy it locally, while paying extra to import something nutritionally similar from the other side of the world. That's what resilience actually looked like. Food sources that worked without constant external inputs, without supply chains, without depending on distant suppliers or complex logistics. Now, food travels an average of 1,500 miles from farm to plate. Lettuce grown in California's Central Valley, packaged in Salinas, trucked to a distribution center, trucked to regional warehouse, trucked again to retail, all needing diesel, refrigeration, climate control. Crops need synthetic fertilizers, made from natural gas, through this process called Haber-Bosch that uses about 1 to 2% of all global energy. The system is incredibly efficient at moving food around and producing high yields from intensive farming. It's also pretty fragile. COVID exposed that fragility. In March 2020, grocery shelves emptied not because food vanished, but because just-in-time supply chains couldn't handle stress. That wasn't collapse, just pressure, and it was enough to create real insecurity. Lamb's quarter, growing in empty lots and along roads, was unaffected. It kept growing, indifferent to the disruption. People are rediscovering this plant now, not because institutions are promoting it, but because information moves differently these days. Foragers are posting on Instagram showing their harvests. Buckets of fresh greens, close-ups of those distinctive white powdered leaves, finished dishes. Thousands of posts creating this whole knowledge base that exists outside traditional institutions. Permaculture designers are deliberately including lamb's quarter in food forest designs. Instead of fighting it, they're recognizing it as beneficial. It adds nutrients to the system, provides food, attracts beneficial insects, pulls up minerals from deep in the soil, adds diversity. Regenerative agriculture farms often have lamb's quarter growing right in and around their crop rows on purpose. High-end restaurants in food-conscious cities have discovered lamb's quarter and are now serving it as a delicacy. Portland restaurants charging $28 for a plate of sautéed wild greens featuring it. Brooklyn places listing foraged goosefoot on tasting menus for $35. San Francisco advertising locally foraged lamb's quarter as a seasonal specialty. The exact same plant growing wild in parking lots is being served on fancy plates with wine pairings, while county maintenance workers spray it in the park across the street. The plant didn't change. The presentation did. So if you're interested in actually accessing this plant yourself, there are basically 3 ways to do it. The simplest option is foraging. It costs nothing but time, as long as you can identify the plant correctly and harvest from land that hasn't been sprayed. Lamb's quarter is easy to recognize. Goosefoot-shaped leaves with shallow lobes, a distinctive white flower-like coating on young growth, and often reddish coloring at the leaf joints. It grows upright, can reach several feet tall, and produces small green flower clusters in summer. A quick safety note matters here. Lamb's quarter is sometimes confused with black nightshade, which is not edible. Nightshade lacks the white powdery coating, has more oval leaves, and produces small white or purple tomato-like flowers. Never eat anything unless you're completely certain of the identification. When foraging, avoid roadsides, treated lawns, or any area that may contain chemicals, heavy metals, or runoff. Don't harvest from private property without permission. Take no more than about 30% of a patch so it can regenerate, and wash everything thoroughly before eating. The safest source is your own yard or trusted land where no chemicals are used. Second, buy seeds and grow it yourself. Baker Creek Heirloom Seeds has packets for $3.25. Strictly Medicinal Seeds has organic varieties. You can find seeds on Amazon and eBay too, or just collect them from wild plants in the fall. Growing it is super easy. Scatter seeds in early spring or late fall, barely cover them with soil, water occasionally until they're established, then basically ignore them. It grows in zones 3 through 10, which is pretty much the entire continental US. Harvest young leaves all season. Let some plants go to seed for next year. Third, try to buy it fresh. Though honestly, this is the hardest option because it's barely sold anywhere. Some farmers markets in really food-focused cities might have foragers selling wild greens. If you find it, expect $8 to $20 a pound. Why does this matter right now specifically? 3 reasons, and they're all getting worse. Climate's getting more unstable. which makes industrial agriculture increasingly risky. Systems that depend on predictable weather patterns are struggling as those patterns become unreliable. Lamb's quarter is drought-tolerant, frost-tolerant, pest-resistant, loves disturbed soil. It's basically evolved to handle chaos. As climate gets less stable, having food sources that don't need perfect conditions becomes really practical insurance. Economic pressure is another factor. Food prices keep rising while wages aren't, which makes free nutrition a lot more relevant. And people are starting to realize how dependent we are on systems we don't control. Supply chains, corporations, whatever. Growing or foraging your own food isn't about going back to primitive times. It's about remembering that other options exist. Food sovereignty movements are growing as people wake up to how much control we've handed over to systems that don't have our best interests in mind. Growing or foraging becomes a way of reclaiming some independence, opting out of systems that profit from keeping us dependent and ignorant. Lamb's quarter works great as a starting point because it's almost impossible to mess up. It's literally everywhere, and you get nutritional benefits immediately. This isn't about rejecting modern life. It's about understanding that sophisticated doesn't always mean complicated. And sometimes the most resilient solutions are the ones that have been working for 10,000 years. Look, the plant never changed. For 10,000 years, it's been delivering complete protein with all 9 essential amino acids, more calcium than dairy, more vitamin C than oranges, more potassium than bananas, minerals like magnesium and manganese that most people don't get enough of. It's been growing wherever humans needed it without requiring anything from us. What changed was our economic system, which couldn't figure out how to profit from something that takes care of itself. It got removed not because it failed, but because it worked too well in ways that couldn't be monetized or controlled. The plant is still here, still growing in sidewalk cracks and disturbed soil, still offering 309 milligrams of calcium per 100 grams, still providing complete protein, still containing compounds that help with cholesterol management naturally. It just needs people to stop walking past it and actually look down. That weed, with 3 times the calcium of spinach, isn't hidden through conspiracy. It's hidden through inattention, through economic structures that benefit from our ignorance, through language that turned fat hen into pigweed. Sometimes the plants offering the most value are the ones we've been trained to ignore. 10,000 years of human survival figured that out. Maybe it's time we remembered.